nothing you won't do, no place that I could hide. You're always in pursuit, I'm never too far gone, always in your side. When I wait for you, you're always right on time. You're always pursuing, always pursuing, always pursuing me. More than the air I breathe, I need you here with me. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop chasing me. You made a way for me, opened up the door. Jesus, you have my heart, now and forevermore. You're always pursuing, always pursuing, always pursuing me. More than the air I breathe, I need you here with me. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop chasing me. More than the air I breathe, I need you here with me. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop chasing me. You're always pursuing, always pursuing, always pursuing me. Your love is chasing, your love is chasing, your love is chasing me. You're always pursuing, always pursuing, always pursuing me. Oh, your love is chasing, your love is chasing, your love is chasing me. More than the air I breathe, I need you here with me. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop chasing me. More than the air I breathe, I need you here with me. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop. And you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop chasing me. No, you're never, and you're never gonna stop, never gonna stop. Oh,
Welcome to Crowned News. My name is Sam Stone. If you missed last week, Crowned News uncovered that we can show mercy to others because God shows mercy to us. Not sure what that means? You'll have to go back and watch for yourself because the only direction we're going is forward. As we continue our report about peculiar behavior of royalty in the Bible, today we focus on a queen named Esther. Citizens from our kingdom have been calling in demanding to know what the story of Esther can teach us and why in the world we should give a hoot. Fear not, unknown citizens of Misty Meadows. At Crown News, we're here to help you. Angela Knightley is on site at the Misty Meadows Castle Library, where King Boris William III's librarian has been reported to really know her stuff. Angela is there now to see if she can help us understand more about the amazing story of Queen Esther. Over to you, Angela.
Thanks, Sam. I'm here at the library and currently waiting to meet with the librarian, Frankie Finkelstein. While we wait, let's take a look at the story that has people so confused. This story is found in the Old Testament of the Bible in the book of Esther, chapters 2 through 9. Take a look at this video, and when you get back, hopefully Frankie will be interested in sharing what she knows about the story of Esther.
One of the bravest queens in all the land was Queen Esther. But she wasn't brave on her own. She depended on God to give her the strength and courage she needed. Esther was a beautiful girl, and she was one of God's people. She lived with her cousin Mordecai, and the two of them loved God very much. When Esther grew up, the king of her land, King Xerxes, chose her to be his queen. The king did so many nice things for Esther. He gave her fancy clothes and pretty jewels, but there was trouble brewing. King Xerxes had a helper in his palace called Haman. Haman did not love God or his people. Haman was really clever and planned to trick the king into making a law that would have all of God's people killed. When Esther heard about this, she knew she had to talk to the king. But it wasn't as easy as just walking into the throne room. If King Xerxes didn't ask you to come speak to him and you just showed up, it could mean big trouble. You had to be invited to speak to the king. Even the queen needed an invitation. Queen Esther didn't have the bravery or the courage to speak to the king on her own, so she asked for God's help. She also asked her cousin Mordecai and all of God's people to pray for her. As they prayed, Esther went to talk to King Xerxes. The king was happy to see her and invited her in. He said to her, "Tell me what you want and I'll give it to you." She invited the king and Haman to a dinner where she exposed Haman's plan to kill her people. The king couldn't believe that Haman would do such a terrible thing and had him taken away for good. Because Esther depended on God for help, God's chosen and special people were safe. It's easy to think we can depend on ourselves, but we are blessed when we depend on God.
Welcome back. I'm now here with Frankie Finkelstein. Frankie, have you read the story of Esther and heard all the confusion it's creating?
Oh yes, I do love reading about King Xerxes and Queen Esther. I would like to first point out that this story actually happened in the past. In literature, we call that non-fiction. But I want you to know that you can read all about Queen Esther in other history books, not just the Bible. This is very much a real story.
Wow, that changes things for me, knowing that all this really happened a long time ago. Can you help us understand what we can learn from this story?
Oh yes, in fact, I'm currently reading several stories about Queen Esther to better understand. And let me tell you, this is fascinating. Queen Esther is a marvelous example of how we can depend on God.
Excellent. Can you share some of what you have found with us?
Certainly. But before we go further, I think it's important that we all understand what the word depend means. Do you know what depend means?
Yes, it's...
The best place to look for a definition is in the nice, fresh pages of a dictionary. Here it is. Depend, which is a verb, means to rely on another.
Like getting picked up from school. You depend on an adult to pick you up because you can't drive yourself.
Exactly. Now, please don't interrupt me again. It's extremely rude.
Right. My apologies.
Now, we understand that we can discuss how Esther's story is an example to us of how to depend on God. Throughout my research, I have discovered ways that God works in ways we can see, but also in ways we cannot see.
Interesting. So, what are the ways God was working in Esther's story?
Oh, so glad you asked. There are tons of ways. Let's see. Here are a few. First, Mordecai had saved King Xerxes from being killed years earlier. The fact that that was recorded in King Xerxes' book of life events was no coincidence. God was working and knew the king would read this some years later. But I'll get back to that in a minute. I suppose King Xerxes didn't know it was Mordecai who had saved him all those years ago. This is an example of God working in an unseen way in Esther's life. We see a second example of God working in Esther's life when she was allowed to be in King Xerxes' presence. In a normal situation, Esther knew she couldn't show up before King Xerxes and demand things.
Oh, really? Why not?
Oh my, well, back in those days, no one was allowed in the king's presence unless the king asked them to come to him. Esther knew she needed help to get time with King Xerxes, and she asked all of her people to pray that the king would let her speak to him. They prayed that he would be willing to hear her request. Esther was depending on God by asking for what she needed through prayer.
And we just saw in that clip that she did get to go to King Xerxes without getting into trouble. God is dependable.
Precisely. And not only did the king allow her into his presence, he was happy to see her. He even allowed her to request 2 different dinner parties. Now, this is where it gets really crazy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, the night before the second dinner party, King Xerxes couldn't fall asleep. Do you know what he did?
No, what?
Well, do you remember that book about King Xerxes' life that we talked about earlier?
Yes.
Well, that evening, King Xerxes requested a servant to read it to him. Xerxes thought hearing this book would help him fall asleep. Kind of a random book to pick, don't you think? Well, this is an example of God working. While listening to that boring book about Xerxes' life, he learned that Mordecai had saved him years earlier from being killed. At that moment, Xerxes wanted to make sure he thanked Mordecai, and he wanted to figure out who was behind all those evil schemes. But if you remember, the evil villain Haman was planning to have Mordecai killed the very next day.
I'm confused. How is that an example of how we can depend on God?
It's okay, Angela. I know this is a lot to take in. You see, this is just another way God was working to help Esther's effort to save her people. God was preparing King Xerxes' heart for what Esther would ask him at that dinner party, which was to save Mordecai and all the Jewish people.
That is interesting. God really was working in so many ways.
Oh, yes, you are correct. Because Esther depended on God for help, he used her to save all the Jewish people.
Simply amazing. Thank you, Frankie, for this very in-depth look at how Esther depended on God. We are well over our time. This is Angela Knightley for Crown News. Back to you, Sam.
Thanks, Angela. That was very extensive, yet extremely fascinating. We are down to the wire now on time, but you might be wondering why in the world we should give a hoot. We most certainly should give a hoot, because now we can see how God works in seen and unseen ways. Esther knew God was dependable, and what we need to know is that God never changes, and that the story of Esther shows us that we too can depend on God. Wondering how to start depending on God? Pray. Pray and tell God everything, the good, the bad, the silly, the ugly, the joyous, the heartwarming, well, you get the idea. When we pray, we can trust that God is going to do something, whether we see it or not. It may not be the way that we thought or even wanted, but we can trust that God is dependable, and that is why we should give a hoot. Well, that's a wrap for today. I'm Sam Stone, giving you all the news from the Misty Meadow Kingdom. Have a sunshiny day. Welcome to Crown News. Welcome to Crown News. Welcome to Crown News. Have a sunshiny day. Have a sunshiny day.